Catch up with the Assistant Minister for Finance, Zed Seselja. Thanks for joining us, Zed. The budget update, you must be pretty disappointed. You know, you win an election in May, you come in with a bunch of largely fought on matters of economic stability, economic fundamentals. You deliver some tax cuts, housing prices are starting to kick up. You can't seem to get the economy growing.
Well, I disagree with a number of parts of that analysis, Chris. What obviously this budget update shows is that as we deal with some pretty significant challenges, the drought being one of those and the impact on rural exports and agriculture as a result of that, but also the slowdown in the global economy, that not only are we able to continue to deliver economic growth, particularly strong employment growth, much faster than the OECD average. We're able to deliver budget surpluses, which our predecessors were completely unable to do. We're able to continue to invest record amounts in our health system, education, in infrastructure, in a range of other responses, aged care, disability, whilst also delivering tax cuts. So yes, we are dealing with some challenges, and they have been laid out today in MYEFO, but when you can deal with those challenges, both global and local, still deliver surpluses, still deliver substantial tax cuts, deliver record investment in critical areas of services and infrastructure, and the economy continues to grow, there is obviously a lot to be very, very positive about.
Well, hang on a second, Zed. You said you disagreed with a few of the things I said in that first question. You did win the election. You have delivered your tax cuts. The housing market is starting to pick up, which they're the 3 points I made. Aren't you frustrated then?
Well, you said we should be very disappointed.
Well, so I said you'd be frustrated. You must be frustrated or disappointed that you haven't seen more economic growth. You're not?
Well, what we're seeing is, if you look at the last 3 quarters of economic growth, they have been stronger than the back end of 2018. So we're seeing it track up. It's not exactly where we had forecast it would be, and there's a number of reasons for that, and they've been outlined by the Treasurer and the Finance Minister today. Yeah. But global economic growth is the lowest since the GFC, down to 3%. Obviously, the drought is having a significant impact, but despite those things, we see strong jobs growth, much stronger than virtually all comparable economies. Certainly, we see economic growth continue, and it is ticking up. We're seeing budget surpluses forecast in the out years, and we're able to continue to deliver record investment in the key areas of service delivery and indeed in infrastructure that the community expects. So we're able to do a lot despite great challenges, and that is the point that's been made, I think, very well by the Treasurer and the Finance Minister today. Yep. And whilst these variations, I should make the point, whilst these parameters, estimates go up and down, what we've seen is that, in fact, we tend to, in the last 3 budgets, we have over-delivered when it comes to some of those estimates. So these are forecasts. These are the best forecasts we have at the moment, but we've got a number of things in place that will continue, we believe, to underpin strong economic growth.
Yeah, there are a number of factors out of your control. One, of course, is the global economy. The other, of course, is the drought. But I suppose the key point is just whether you think or whether you have an eye open at least to perhaps doing any more. As you say, there's been some infrastructure spending brought forward. That's a stimulatory move. There has been a lot of assistance paid out to drought-stricken families too, and while that's desperately needed, it's also stimulatory, I suppose, in face of the drought. Is the government looking at whether or not it might need to do more between now and the budget?
Well, we're always looking at ways we can continue to support strong economic growth and to build on the 1.4 million jobs that have been created since we came to government. So we're working, obviously, on continuing to work on a free trade agenda. That's been a big part of our achievements over recent years. Obviously, the tax cuts are flowing into the economy. We're bringing forward infrastructure. We're also working, of course, on a continuing skills agenda, because that is important that we see the kind of training and skills that is needed for the economy. There's a whole body of work that we are doing in terms of cutting red tape, looking at the work that Ben Morton and the Prime Minister are doing in looking at, from the perspective of a business, as they seek to do business and do their job, which parts of government are helping in those areas and which parts of government may be hindering. So there's a strong agenda that continues to roll out. That will, of course, continue to support jobs, continue to support economic growth. And as you say, a number of those measures, the fact that we've been able to respond to the drought is very, very important. Yes, that will help underpin some of those economies which are very much struggling as a result of the hit to their economies from the drought. But likewise, we've been able to respond to what's been coming out of the interim parts of the Aged Care Royal Commission. We can only do all of that because we've managed the budget well, because we've got a record number of Australians in work, record low percentage on welfare, and because our spending growth in our budget has been around 1.5%, 1.3% at the moment, which is the lowest I think in about 50 years.
Of course, rather logically talk about if you really want to improve the economy and get economic growth going in the medium term, you've got to look at an economic reform agenda, you've got to look at boosting productivity. I suppose you've got to look at where, as a government, you could do the most in this area. Industrial relations is hard, and you've done a bit with your union accountability measures. What about federal-state relations and tackling some of the gross waste and overlap between the federal and state governments? Now it impacts on areas like disability services. You're dealing with the NDIS now, trying to sort that out, I suppose. Might make it worse in some respects, but aged care, health care, some of the energy issues. There's an enormous amount of overlap, even in education. If you could streamline a lot of that, you could get rid of a lot of government waste and free up the economy quite a bit.
Look, there's no doubt that issues around Commonwealth-state relations and, as you point to, some of the inefficiencies in the different levels of government is an ongoing challenge. And I guess we look at that on a case-by-case basis. There have been attempts in the past at various levels to try and address some of those issues. They're not easily done. It needs to be done, obviously, in cooperation with the states because, one, I don't believe in a sort of centralised control out of Canberra where we make all the decisions, and sometimes that would be more efficient, but it's not something that I believe in, and I don't think it's something that most of the states would come at either. So we do continue to work with the states on that. When you talk about things like disability, obviously as we've rolled out the NDIS, we do see a change in the way that occurs, and we have seen the Commonwealth doing more as a result of the decision to do the NDIS. As we roll that out, and there's been challenges in rolling it out, but as we roll it out and we look after people with disabilities, I think much better in this country, we will see further efficiencies in the way that is delivered, and I guess less of that overlap happening. So there are all sorts of areas you can do it. I'm not going to sort of on today's program, I guess, announce all of those things that I guess various ministers work on from time to time. But look, it's a very legitimate point you make. But fundamentally, we have very strong fundamentals when you can deliver strong budget surpluses, when the economy continues to grow, when employment growth is strong, when we can deliver, invest in services whilst cutting taxes. That puts us in a good position to respond as we face these various challenges that have been outlined.
Zed, you've had a good year. You've been a good friend to the program and the station. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks for all your help during the year. Appreciate your time,